When you marry at age 20 and 21 in the state of Ohio, as we did, I needed my father's signed and sealed permission in order to buy a marriage license. Another state of Ohio requirement was passing a Wasserman test. Who here remembers that? Anyway, when you marry at age 20 and 21, as we did, you face the unknown future with a confident optimism that it will all somehow work out. Sure, we had planned an 8-week honeymoon in Hawaii and Japan. Honeymooning in Japan was quite a novelty in 1958. And I was going to Harvard Law School in the fall, and Judy was going to study political science and local government at Boston University in the fall. And we knew we were going to have children and to raise a family someday. And we knew we could count on the love and support of our families, both the Rauhs and the Falks. But on the other side of these vague and undifferentiated sets of feelings and expectations lay a vast, uncharted void, which was the future. 60 years have now passed, 2/3 of a century. And I can look back and see that with persistence, understanding, love, and a little luck, it all worked out. So we're now gathered here to honor Judy's life. That meant so much to so many of us gathered in this room and in Maine and elsewhere. Thank you for coming. I am now honored to turn the microphone to Dr. Renee Jenkins, retired professor of pediatrics at Howard University and past president of the American Academy of Pediatrics and of the Society of Adolescent Medicine. Renee, along with Judy's oldest brother, Jerry Rauh, and several others, were the founders of adolescent medicine as a separate medical specialty. Adolescents have special medical and psychological needs. Many adolescents feel they have outgrown their baby doctors, but they do not want to switch to their parents' doctors. They want their own. And now, thanks to Renee, to Jerry Rauh, and to their colleagues in many places around the country, they can have their own. I give you Renee Jenkins.
Thank you so much, David. First of all, I'd like to thank you for giving me the privilege of sharing my dearest memories of my friendship with Judy. I came to know Judy because of her brother Jerry Rauh, and his son is here, and I had a chance to meet him. It was great. Jerry and I were in a specialty, as David described to you, of pediatricians who take care of adolescents. We actually do it voluntarily. Jerry started an adolescent medicine program at Cincinnati Children's Hospital and was considered really a founding father in the field of adolescent medicine. When I told him that I had accepted a position in adolescent medicine in Washington, D.C., he says to me, "You must meet my sister. You probably have some things you can do together." Well, the rest is history. We quickly discovered a shared passion for improving the health of young people, both physically and mentally. I had volunteered at a teen center in New York City when I was a fellow called The Door, and we used that as a model to create the Center for Youth Services on Capitol Hill. It took a lot of meetings, most of them in Judy and David's home. I'm still surprised we didn't wear out a welcome. Judy probably used up also a good deal of her political capital, but successfully recruited volunteers and donors to make it happen. Judy and I spent a lot of time together during those early years, often with my 3-year-old in tow. She became very attached to Judith Fox, who became an important figure in her developmental village. She was mesmerized by Judith Fox's colorful, unique dinnerware. Even years later, when she saw anything similar, she would point and say, "Those are Judith Fox dishes." Fast forward to 1984, and our work was recognized when Judy and I were named as one of the Washingtonian of the Year awardees. But our true reward came from the voices of the young people we served. I found an old CYS brochure. This is for people who don't throw anything away, okay? And this brochure has in it a quote that I want to share with you, giving you the voice of the kids that we served. In quotes, "I was 16 and pregnant. I was confused, depressed, and did not feel good about myself. I felt like I was on the verge of becoming just another young Black woman with a child to care for, with no job and a limited education. Since I joined the Center for Youth Services, I have struggled to put the pieces of my life together. It was hard and still is difficult. It has taken me 2 years to get a GED, but I did it. I am now working at a nursing home and attending the University of the District of Columbia to get a degree in nursing. That is the reward." About 7,500 at-risk youth got opportunities to overcome economic and social obstacles through CYS. What an experience Judy led us into. Even in her final days, when her health was failing and she was preparing to say goodbye to us, I asked what she wanted, a last wish. What was her last wish? And in classic Judy fashion, it was about making change, advocating for maternal health, and working to reduce maternal mortality in the District of Columbia through her deep ties to Planned Parenthood. She leaves a powerful public health legacy. I will treasure the work we did at CYS, the kids we helped, friends who contributed their time, treasure, and talent, and new friends who came to make CYS successful for 15 years. To David and Judy's children, thank you so much for sharing her. She was the ultimate advocate for healthy mothers and for helping young people grow into productive and responsible young adults. I came across a tribute message that touched my heart, and I'd like to share it with you. Friendship transcends death. The memories we made doing the things we both loved will never be forgotten. I am a better person for having such a wonderful friend in Judy. So thank you for giving me the privilege of sharing my memories of Judy.
I'm Renata Selig, and you might wonder how Judy became so attached to the state of Maine. So that's how I'll start. It began when she was 8 years old, leaving Cincinnati on a 2-day train ride and with one overnight train by herself. And the train ride was to spend her summers in Maine at the camp that we both shared. It was an all-girls camp called Camp Figa on Echo Lake in Maine. So she was 8 years old, but I arrived at age 11 in that camp to become her bunkmate and friend for life thereafter. So Camp Figa was named for one of the brightest stars in the heavens. And our cabins there were named for lakes and rivers of Maine. So we stayed in cabins called Casco, Sebago, Moosehead, and the tallest peak in Maine, Katahdin, was for the oldest campers. The focus of this camp was really on learning about the natural world. So we were developing skills and resilience while we hiked the nearby hills, paddled in the lake, sailed the boats, and sang the songs of the loons, which we heard at night. Judy and I both were very enthusiastic canoers, and we were rewarded for our canoeing skills when we were about 13 years old, and we went on a 5-day canoeing trip, which Judy remembered in complete detail. We paddled from lake to lake, we portaged our boats, and then we ended up in a storm, which was so dangerous, we really nearly capsized. And Judy would recall it to me frequently. It was really quite scary. It was a very risky trip. Now, the camp's highest honors for us girls was to become junior Maine guides. And to become a junior Maine guide, you had to study for a rigorous program of preparation, of learning about the state of Maine and various skills, including, as I recall particularly, how to make a fire with wet wood. So we had all kinds of challenges like that. And then at the end of that period of time, there was a statewide meeting for all the youngsters who were participating in this program to test to become a junior Maine guide, and Judy certainly achieved that. And it led to her great interest in hiking in the out of doors. So, Judy then went on to do lots of hiking with her family, with Laura, Ellie, and Peter, and David, of course. They did extensive hiking. But then Judy always knew what was the right thing to do. She was very decisive, as we know. And one of her advices to me was always, don't leave home on a trip without a turtleneck. I don't know if any of you heard that too, but that was one of her favorite sayings. Then I remember one summer, she also was determined not to waste any of her materials. So she had a bottle of citronella, which we used to prevent ourselves from getting mosquito bites. So she buried it at the end of the summer, and then the next summer unearthed it so she could continue to use it. I mean, I can still visualize that. It was 75 years ago. So she hosted, about 30 years ago, she hosted a camp reunion when she had the home in Maine already. We gathered together with some former counselors. And she made some notes of that event, and she reflected, and these are some of the words that she said. The immense influence of my summers were the immense influence of my summers there created lifelong friends, knowing my own desires and guts to pursue them, meeting counselors who were fine role models for me, and knowledge of the wide world. So she and I entered Wellesley in the same class with 6 friends from that summer camp. So it was a very easy transition for us. So Judy was prepared for college she was well prepared for college by her parents, who were really very intelligent, politically active people. And she had an Aunt Bowser, whom she talked about frequently, who was a noted pediatrician in Cincinnati. And I remember as a child, she would always admire her greatly. So and she followed both her mother and Aunt Bowser to Wellesley. And on a blind date in her sophomore year, she met David, who was also a sophomore at Harvard at that time. And it quickly became apparent that they were well suited to one another, as they both loved, had a shared love of the out of doors and of travel. And as David mentioned earlier, after they married, they took a honeymoon trip to Japan, which was at that time very unusual for people. Now, Judy's attachment to the Pine Tree State led her to purchase a lakeside home there. And you know, she even, I don't know if you're aware, she even changed her residence to Maine for a couple of years from Washington because of her devotion to Maine. Then she hung paintings of Maudson Huntley, a Maine artist, on the walls, bought furniture that was only made in Maine, and grew native plants in Maine. She became engaged in the community there as chairman of the Saltbed Chamber Fest, and she supported the publication of a biography of Kate Furbish, who was a 19th century Maine botanist who had discovered a rare Maine plant, which was later named for her as the Furbish lousewort. It was an endangered species and had a minor role in the prevention of a dam being constructed on the St. Johns River. And even in the last months, as I spoke with her, she was still engaged in another activity in Maine, which was the preservation of the Francis Perkins House on Damariscotta River. And it was a restoration of the house, and Frances Perkins was the first female cabinet member. She was the Secretary of Labor, I believe it was, with Roosevelt. So whenever I was visiting in Maine with Judy, we would always immediately go out and go canoeing together on the lake. And she had an old town canoe, which was similar to the canoes that we used to have as children, not those current aluminum ones. It was the real thing. And we immediately did that. Now, my husband, Ed, and I also shared many, many trips when you'll probably hear more about that from Zona, but we shared many trips abroad. But the first trip was when David took a sabbatical and invited us to join him on a sailing trip where we met in Yugoslavia, and then we sailed all the way down to Greece. But the challenging part of the sailboat, where we were just 4 of us on the boat, was when we had to pass by
Albania.
where was it that?
It was Albania.
We passed by Albania, and at that time Albania was under communist rule, and there had been an episode where the Albanians had gone out to sea and attacked, I think there was an American boat there, and it was considered to be very, very dangerous. So our captain took us way out from the coastline, and we all had to stand watch throughout the night, take turns, so that we would be safe. He was very, very worried about that. But it was a wonderful, wonderful trip that we had together. Now, Judy was really a very self-confident woman who was extremely productive in her life, I thought, and engaged with people and issues. And she faced her last illness with a lot of openness and directness, and she was able to do this because she had such good support from David and the children. So they offered her much love and care. And I'll miss our lifelong friendship, as well as her birthday gifts to me in the last few years, which were a delivery of ice cream from her favorite Grater's ice cream store in Cincinnati, which came directly to my home in Boston. So I will be very much missing her, as I'm sure all of you will as well.
Judy was a dear friend. Judith Rauh Falk was a force of nature, an influencer before that term was even coined, an initiator, an organizer, a leader, an exemplar of what one person with caring and determination can accomplish in one's lifetime. And Judy did care about lots of things. And Judy was determined. No shrinking violet Judy. She never hesitated to let her views known on a wide range of subjects. She did not hesitate to act when she decided on a course of action, and she persevered. In addition to her notable determination was her ever-present sense of humor, often accompanied by a very hearty laugh, and what I admired most of all was her empathy and genuine caring for others. In the mid-60s, Judy and 3 small children went with David to Peru for David's work with the Agency for International Development. Judy, being Judy, of course, learned to speak Spanish fluently. Judy never did anything halfway. She worked at a women's health clinic run by French Catholic nuns. And when the Falk family returned from Peru, Judy was determined to put her Peruvian health clinic experience to good use. And she went to work with Planned Parenthood of DC. She worked on the staff at Planned Parenthood for several years, and later in life she served on its board of directors. She organized, while she was on the staff, 6 neighborhood clinics which she supervised for adolescent women, which clinics included a heavy dose of educational programs in sexuality, birth control, and other women's health issues. And by the way, she brought her work and her uninhibited candor not only home, but also to her wide network of friends, and with them shared all that she knew about sex and sexuality. Those of us in Judy's network had no reason to consult the popular talk show host and sex therapist, Dr. Ruth. We had our own personal Dr. Judy. Judy loved to recall for us with a hearty laugh that her very proper mother forbade Judy, when she went off to college, to ever spend the night with boyfriends, even a fiance. But her mother had no objection to Judy going on overnight camping trips. Her mother could not imagine that any hanky-panky could possibly take place in sleeping bags. Then Judy became interested in the new pediatric program at Johns Hopkins, focused on the mental health of adolescents that David talked about when introducing Renee. And with David's unstinting support, she enrolled in the program, traveling 1 day a week to the Johns Hopkins campus in Baltimore. This was a natural evolution of interest, not only because of Judy's work with Planned Parenthood, but also because of her Rauh family experiences in the medical field. the Rauh expertise. This included her beloved Aunt Louise, known as Aunt Bowser, who was a trailblazing pediatrician in Cincinnati in the early part of the 20th century, and her pediatrician brother Jerry, who Renee talked about. As you heard, Judy and Renee worked together, setting up a program for adolescents, and were named Washingtonians of the Year. So just as she shared with her friends for Planned Parenthood, that she shared her knowledge about sex education, she now had additional knowledge to share on a whole host of medical issues. She had an extensive medical network through her Rauh medical relatives and through Johns Hopkins. And so when we needed to find names of good doctors, we always called Judy. She was a whiz at consulting her networks and finding doctors for us. One constant at all stages of Judy's life was her love for all generations of her family. She often talked lovingly and with pride about her parents, and also about her trailblazing pediatrician Aunt Bowser and her famous civil liberties lawyer, Uncle Joe Rauh. She kept in close touch with the extended family and took great joy in organizing family reunions, including siblings, in-laws, and cousins. And of course, she loved her children and grandchildren fiercely and unconditionally. A conversation with Judy almost always included an update on at least one of the children or grandchildren. And Judy adored her husband, David. She frequently would say how lucky she was to have David share life with her. In addition to her medical bones, Judy was passionate about nature, and she became something of an expert about flowers native to this continent. When she went on trips, she tried to find local gardens to research their collections. She also liked to browse the library at Bowdoin College in Maine, and that is how she came to play a significant role in the publication of the book entitled Kate Furbish and the Flora of Maine. Kate Furbish, you may have not heard of her, was an amateur botanist who was born in 1834 and also a gifted artist who studied art in Boston and in Paris. Bowdoin's library had more than 1,000 of Furbish's original watercolor drawings of Maine flora. Judy not only admired the drawings, she was utterly captivated by the story of Kate Furbish, a gritty and indomitable woman, never married, spent most of her 97 years around the turn of the century scouring every corner of Maine's wildlife area alone, by horse and carriage, sometimes on foot, in her search to discover every wildlife, fern and herb in Maine, which she would collect and preserve and also make a record of with meticulous botanical illustrations. Sometimes Kate would crawl down on her stomach, down a riverbank to reach a specimen. If she were living today, Kate Furbish would have studied botany at Harvard's renowned herbarium, a place where some 400 of Kate's plant specimens now reside, including a Maine flower named after Kate. But of course, Harvard did not admit women in the 1800s. Judy essentially bonded with this extraordinary woman born 100 years earlier than herself. So Judy plaintively said to the Bowdoin librarian, what a shame it was there was no biography of Kate Furbish. The librarian said, well, actually there was one, but it was not published. Judy was told that the unpublished manuscript was at the home of Ada and Frank Graham, Maine conservationists and authors of many articles and books. Unfortunately, the company that was going to publish the furbished book had gone bankrupt, and the Grahams were unable to find a new publisher. The Grahams reported no one wanted to publish a book about a spinster botanist from Maine. The unpublished manuscript just took up space in the Grahams' home for 7 or 8 years, until Judy, having tracked them down, arrived one day to have lunch with them. After a lovely lunch, Judy left with the manuscript in her hand. And ultimately, with Judy's financial help, the book was published. In 1995, the initial printing of 3,000 copies sold out immediately. Judy was drawn not only to Kate Furbish's beautiful drawings, but also to art and architecture generally. She organized numerous trips with families and friends to visit museums and architectural gems all over the world. Judy herself was very artistic and able to draw with considerable skill. She often lamented that she did not major in art in college because her father strongly felt that it was not an appropriate choice for a young lady. Judy's artistic genes and interests manifested themselves in her exquisite aesthetic sensibility and her choice of home furnishings and her choice of beautifully color-coordinated clothes and in her gardens. Judy was a master gardener, and both her Maine and DC gardens were house and garden magazine kind of showplaces, filled of course with the native plants that she loved and whose botanical names she knew. It was always fun to be with Judy. She hosted delightful dinner parties in her beautiful home, serving delicious meals that she had prepared herself, stimulating conversations with always interesting guests. Judy was up to date on all the political and cultural issues of the day and loved to talk about them. To ensure that she would have ongoing opportunities for interesting discussions, she organized groups. There was a book club she co-founded with her friend Vicki Jaycox and invited some 20 of the best read and most thoughtful women she knew to join the bi-monthly discussions. Alas, I wasn't part of the book club. She organized a woman's life discussion group, which members met for potluck suppers and talked about everything going on in their lives at the time. Careers, the changing roles of women in the workplace, and health issues, the aging process, whether or not to sell homes and move into continuing care places. She also planned and organized numerous trips with friends. With one group of friends, she co-founded a group we dubbed the Golden Agers Travel Group. We hiked or walked in places like the Cotswolds, the Dolomites, and the Canadian Rockies, and then when hiking, and even walking, eventually became more difficult, we checked into B&Bs and hotels in cities closer to home. Judy also organized many family trips, and she and David biked, hiked, canoed, climbed, and toured all over the world. And finally, Judy organized her last chapter. Judy had many, many friends, and she nurtured her friendships, always checking in to see how they were, bringing homemade chicken soup when one was ill, offering consolation and support when one was having difficulties or suffering a loss. When Judy found out some months ago that the several cancers that she had been valiantly fighting for several years could no longer be fought successfully, she did not hesitate to let her friends know that she was ending her life's journey. She did this calmly and honestly, insisting that they not dwell on her illness at the time, in the time remaining to her, but continue to talk to her and visit with her as they always had. As Judy's friend Sandy Fitzpatrick wrote, Judy showed us all how we could face the last years of our life's journey. This was Judy's final gift to us after a splendid life on this planet. And this final gift from Judy would not have been possible, though, without the love and support of her amazing family. Lori and Peter flew in frequently from 3,000 miles away. Ellie drove in from Annapolis several days a week. Judy's beloved granddaughters, Molly, Phoebe, Kitty, and Julia, visited or checked in often. And of course, calm, steady David was constantly with Judy every day until the end. I'm grateful beyond words for the wonderful gift of Judy's friendship for nearly 65 years.
When I think about Mom, Judith Rauh Falk, 6 things come to mind. Her ability to maintain friendships, her ability to question in a reasonable, responsible way, her networking skills, her outdoor skills, her self-sufficiency, and her planning. You've already heard a lot about her friendships and how she maintained them by writing notes and giving people a call just to check in and making sure that if you were in the same town together at the same time, that you would spend time together. And you heard a little bit about her intergenerational relationships. She was the person who kept in touch with her parents' friends, even decades after her parents were gone. And she was deeply affected by the death of her own mother at 63 and her father at 65. And therefore, she found really special meaning in being Oma. She got to be part of her oldest grandchild's life for 28 years and her youngest grandchild for 24. She would get her special time with her grandchildren by suggesting that she and Dad give the parents a break by prompting us to take a getaway or an anniversary trip. And then once the grandchildren were old enough to travel on their own, Mom would invite them to spend the week in Maine or go see them for weekends in New York, where she would plan dinner at fancy restaurants, not just for the food, which food was very important to her, but also because they had dress codes and she wanted to see them get dressed up. Mom even learned in her 80s how to text, specifically so that she could keep in touch with them. Mom was fearless in social settings, and social anxiety is real to many of us. But what I learned from her was how to ask people questions about themselves so that I wouldn't be socially anxious. And she had a special way of asking you a question that had substance, but wasn't too personal or too invasive, unless you knew her really well, in which case you might get an invasive question thrown in there. But she was also a really careful listener, and she would respond to something you said and build a conversation on that. It's really an essential skill that I feel I learned from her. And then there's networking. She was an incredible networker. And I will admit that as a young adult, I found the emphasis that Judy placed on who you knew and the networking to be pretty aggravating. I didn't have words for that at the time, but now in today's world, we do have words, and it felt like taking advantage to me at the time. But looking back, I know that that's not how she meant it, because she really wanted people to build connections. And so I have a specific example of that. Mom could be really strong-willed, and if she set her mind on making a network connection for you, like that was that, you were not getting out of it. And the first professional networking she set me up with was with Peggy Fleming, here with us today, who was a ranger at the Rock Creek National Park. And I knew I wanted a career in natural resources, and Mom wanted to help me. And even though I knew Peggy as a mom, not as a professional, she had me take the initiative and make the phone call and go into the office and sit down with Peggy with my list of 5 questions. And then Peggy took me out into the field next door to look at a meadow restoration project, and all was good. Mom's 4th superpower was her fearlessness in the outdoors. And you heard about the train trip. The way she would describe that to us was that train trip was when her life truly began, because she had independence from her parents' expectations and could grow into her own person. As well, you heard about the road trip that she and my dad took camping, but the version of the story that was told to me had nothing to do with sleeping bags, but had to do with cooking, because she was showing off her campcraft skills, and then a bear came into camp to eat her chocolate pudding, and she took the metal pot and a spoon and banged on it and said, "You bear, you get away from my chocolate pudding." I actually, when I was young and in the Yellowstone National Park and Yosemite National Parks, both of which have a lot of bears, including grizzly, would sleep with a metal pot next to my head and a spoon, just in case. Mom was also the first in our family to try out alpine skiing, which is a sport that today Peter and myself and Patrick and Phoebe and Molly all really enjoy, and we ski together. And there are many other Rauhs in this room who also really enjoy skiing. Sorry, not just Rauhs, also Rosses. She brought Ellie, Peter, and me to Black Mountain in Conway, New Hampshire with Ann and Joe and their children. And Dad stayed back because skiing was dangerous and he had to work. Well, we took our ski lessons, and on the second day that we were there, we had a little medical episode that ended up with one of us in a hospital, not related to skiing, but Dad had to drop everything and get on a plane up to New England and then take Ellie and Peter skiing, after which he decided it was kind of fun and we really ought to be skiing in the West where the snow's a little better. And so that spawned decades of ski trips with many family members, and as I said, a sport we still do today. Mom stayed comfortable in the outdoors to the end of her life, and I will always remember that on her 85th birthday, she went out in a solo canoe on Damariscotta Lake with me and Ellie there in kayaks, just in case. She led the way. She was in her vest and her red ball cap, and it was morning. There was beautiful mist on the lake. It was calm as could be, and that was Mom's happy place. Another superpower that she had was the ability to inspire women, both by her own example, clearly influenced by Bowser, but also just navigating through the world with the ability to earn a living and be self-sufficient. And this made a huge impression on me as a young woman, and I think on her grandchildren as well. She was also a planner, and the way I see it, she did have some anxiety, and planning really helped her manage the what if scenarios. And we all greatly benefited from her ability to plan ahead, whether it was vacations or trips. When Judy planned, it meant you were gonna have time together. And that was part of what kept her going. Even as she managed her fourth and final cancer, Mom was planning, and we knew that the end was near for her when her interest in planning tapered off. And the Marsden Hartley painting was really the last of her great plans. And then, she knew when the day came. She woke up that morning and she knew that that was that. And so grateful that we're all here just to have this time to remember her.
Hi, I am Ellie, Judy's middle child. I want to talk about 3 aspects of my mom that I really appreciate. The first is the priority Mom put on our family life growing up. She cared about us having family dinners together, and she made them happen every night. It wasn't until years later that I realized how grounding and important these dinners were to my sense of well-being and my closeness with my parents and siblings, as well as where I learned how to discuss politics and the importance of keeping abreast of current events. Mom was the planner of our regular weekend family outings. When we lived in Peru, I remember beach trips and explorations where we climbed ancient ruins. In my teen years, family outings included hiking the Billy Goat Trail, climbing Old Rag Mountain, biking along the Potomac, skating on the C&O Canal when it froze, and visiting the Smithsonian museums with enough frequency that I felt like the paintings at the National Gallery were personal friends. I do remember rebelling one Saturday and refusing to go on the family outing, and then being extremely regretful when the family came back, all relaxed, sharing inside jokes from their adventure. I learned my lesson. That was the only time I opted out. Mom was the organizer behind all of our family vacations, including a marvelous trip to Mexico with brother John, where cousin Carol gave me swim lessons. Probably the best trip Mom arranged was to the British Virgin Islands during the steady trade winds. Mom chartered a sailboat, even though she got nervous when it heeled, and she white-knuckled it through each strong gust. Looking back, what I appreciate the most were the wilderness outings. Backpacking in Colorado's Weminuche Range with Uncle Sigo, Cousin Peggy, and Aunt Ann Ross, canoeing down the Allagash and St. John rivers in Maine, and cross-country skiing in Yellowstone. Mom was game for it all. As you can imagine, Mom was the moving force behind all of the birthday and anniversary celebrations and our family Thanksgiving and Passover gatherings. Mom set a beautiful table with gorgeous flower arrangements from her garden. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, the conversation lively, and as many of you can attest, Mom's cooking was divine. Second, I want to talk about what I admire most about Mom, her lifelong advocacy for women, women's rights, and reproductive freedom. Mom loved her work at Planned Parenthood and took her job of developing teen pregnancy prevention programs very seriously. I have memories of being about 13 years old and coming home to slideshows of IUDs and other contraceptive methods projected on the living room wall as Mom previewed them for work. Mom grilled me to make sure I understood all the birth control options, their pros and cons, so much so that I became the resident expert for my friends. At one back-to-school night, the science chair at my high school realized Mom's expertise and invited Mom to come to school to conduct all the sex education classes. She politely declined and thankfully said she'd never do that to her daughter. 2 years later, in an advanced biology class, that same teacher said something totally inappropriate and sexist about diaphragms as in a method of contraception. I raised my hand and corrected him. He turned all shades of red, profusely apologized, clearly concerned that he would have to contend with my mother. As you know, Mom came of age in the late 1940s and 50s, and she often told me that back then, girls went from being their father's daughter to their husband's wife. This made it all the more important to Mom to open up her own private practice as a psychotherapist in DC after having gone back to school, as you heard, in her 40s to get a master's in mental health from Hopkins. Mom was thrilled to have an office space that was just hers for her work. Mom rightly kept her patient matters private, although I did have a wonderful encounter in my mid-20s. I was in my Annapolis kitchen when my roommate introduced me to his new girlfriend. She learned my name and that I had grown up in DC, and sheepishly asked if Judith Falk was my mother. I said yes, and she gushed, "I love your mother." Turns out, Mom had been her therapist for the past 3 years. She confided that rather than talk about feelings all the time, Mom didn't mind if they dedicated a therapy session to her work. In fact, that would be my mother, making sure this young woman successfully navigated her career on Capitol Hill. My third appreciation for my mother is the way she reached out and developed her own relationships with her grandchildren. For example, we dropped Kitty off at college. Mom was the first person to visit. She flew across the country to see her, to take her out to dinner, and to get to know her friends. Mom demonstrated her caring by showing up to learn about Kitty's new life at college. She did this intentionally for each grandchild in different ways over the past few years. Mom loved being their Oma. To close, I want to share the Christmas card that I wrote Mom this past December. Dear Mom, 10 lessons I learned from you. 1, take a sponge bath every day camping. 2, put low flowers on the table so your guests can see each other. 3, support women. 4, stand up for reproductive rights. 5, refresh your soul in Maine. 6, a good haircut is worth the drive. 7, make family dinners a priority. 8, go to summer camp. 9, canoeing is a noble form of transportation. And 10, marry a good dishwasher. Dad, Mom loved you most of all. And not just for your dishwashing skills. She loved your generosity, your intellect, your wide range of interest, and the fun you brought to the marriage. Thank you for the joy you gave Mom for almost 7 decades and for taking such good care of her in her final days. You were her guiding light. She loved you fiercely.
Hi, I'm Kitty, and I'm Oma's oldest granddaughter. Since Oma died, I've thought most days about the afternoon she bought me and Julia 2 ice cream cones each. It was spring, much like today, sunny and blooming. She loaded us into the back of her ever-practical car after school and drove us to downtown Annapolis. We walked up Main Street to get a scoop of ice cream, then down to the harbor to eat it. And one of us must have gently teased the idea of getting another scoop since a different spot was just across the street. "Why not?" she said, the twinkle in her eye sending us into giggles. We just couldn't believe it. But a few minutes later, we all had more ice cream, and that's who Oma is to me. Generous, playful, and absolutely delighted to be our grandma. Oma and I really enjoyed each other's company. My dad called us 2 peas in a pod. When I was 3, I told her she was really bossy, and I must have said it with all the love my little heart could muster because she recounted the story often and always with a huge smile. I inherited her big emotions, so we really understood each other and took each other's sensitivity seriously. She told me a few times before she passed that she'd been very close with her grandma the same way we were close. "I know it's going to be very hard for you when I leave," she'd say, and it has been. But then I think about Oma lying in the inner tube just off the floating dock, splashing her red painted toes in the lake she loved so much. Her big laugh, the way her face always gave away what she was feeling, disarming and reassuring in how honestly she carried herself. Oma had a way of making things beautiful, and to be in her home is to sit with her still. Fashion, art, her gardens, she had discerning taste and a distinct aesthetic grounded in the colors of the natural world, organic, comfortable textures, and details woven in from her world travels. My grandma suffered no fools. She was sharp and sincere, led by an unwavering moral compass, pointed toward her true north stars of justice, decency, and education. She had a remarkable memory. Once, talking to her on the phone from Paris, she led me by memory down the Seine to the apartment where she'd lived with Papi many decades before. Alma loved people, was curious about people, wanted to understand people and make things better for them. She moved through the world heart first and found fast and close friends everywhere she went. Family was everything to her, and growing up, I didn't realize it was unusual to have both my mom and dad's side at holidays because she made a pointed effort to include my dad's family in everything, Aunt Lizzie back there, and Uncle Tio. My friends loved her because of how she would lean in over the table to catch their every word. And because she'd tell us stories of growing up without birth control, a theme it seems today, and with the curfew of college. So I started my new job in DC this October without an apartment. So I lived with Oma and Papi for 6 weeks. After work and dinner and before bed, I'd go into Oma's room and say, Oma, I need some attention. And then I'd curl up on her bed, lay my head on her shoulder, and we'd chat and laugh until she said, Catherine, I'm going to bed. In the morning, she'd greet me from her crossword puzzle, tell me she was so glad I was there, and help me figure out what to wear. It was just the best. To be loved by Oma was to experience love at its most pure and most raw. My badass grandma, as my friends call her. We had so much fun. My name is Julia, and I am a middle grandchild. There is so much to say about my grandmother. What struck me as I combed through my memories with her in preparation for today was how many there are. How present my grandmother has been in my life. The concerted effort she took to deeply understand and know me. How lucky am I? A few years ago, I spent just 3 months in Denver, and even though it was a short time, Oma visited. In those days together, we had the chance to learn more about one another. At the Denver Art Museum, we saw a dress she had purchased on her homecoming from Peru, which elicited stories about sickness and raising toddlers in an unknown country. Moments of life that were simple, yet shared. There are memories of visits at college, countless walks in museums I never made time for unless she was there. There's ice skating in the sculpture garden, every grandparent day in elementary school, sleepovers that came with the promise of blueberry pancakes and an unlocked front screen door. We did not spend idle time together. Instruction was stitched into everything. A walk in a botanical garden taught me to never combine more than 2 or 3 colors, planted or in a bouquet. Less is boring and more takes away. Time together in Maine taught me the importance of knowing my neighbors and developing a reciprocal relationship with the natural world. Attention demanded at the dinner table taught me to hold my own and stand firm in my opinions. Strong in her feminist convictions, as we've learned over and over today, my grandmother guided me to a political consciousness crafted by compassion and a vision of a more equal world. Beloved cookbooks and hours spent planning and shopping and cooking for family and friends demonstrated what it means to pour into others. That no relationship is without effort, care, and dedication. Perhaps the most transformative lessons came in quiet moments outside, watching my grandmother as she tended to her garden with meticulous care. Sitting together in silence on her dock in Maine, letting the August air roll over us. Moments that showed how to be present in this world, how to treat others, how to love and be loved. And so I leave you with what she left me, The Peace of Wild Things, a poem by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief.
I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and am free. Thank you.
All right, so I'm Phoebe. I'm Judy's youngest granddaughter, and I was going to come up here and give some memories and make a little speech, like everyone else has done, but I had too much to say. I couldn't make it something coherent. So instead, I sat down and I wrote this poem. I call it Dumbarton Oaks. On the day we buried you, the sky was wide and cold and dry, and the magnolias were just coming into bloom. I've been thinking of trees, of gentle-fingered branches and hidden fragile roots, splitting, thinning, until at last their final atoms mingle with air and earth. Your ashes are beneath that path, under foot after foot, and I hope that the little wood box they put you in, gold-lettered, fine-grained, I hope that box yields to the searching roots of that tall, hungry oak which rustles softly in the wind by the path. I hope that tree finds you and knows you and brings you along its braided channels, to bark, to branches, to leaves, and when in autumn those leaves fall, when in winter those branches crack, when the birds strip that bark from the trunk, you will go with them, out into the world, the air, the earth, and I hope you come back to me.
We recite the mourner's cottage to commemorate the passing of a loved one, but the prayer never mentions death. It feels right in the celebration of life to focus not on death, but on peace for all of us and for Oma. Yikadal v'yikadash me'raba, bema dirah yirgutei v'yamlich mahutei, b'hayehon uvyamehon uvhayeh dechol be'Yisrael, ba'gala uvizman karib v'rimru amen. Yehei shmei rabba nevarach le'olam u'olmei almaya. Yiparach v'shabbat v'pa'ar v'ramam v'naseh v'hadar v'toleh v'tolal shemei dekudasha b'rehu le'ela minkol v'rhata v'shirata tush v'hata v'nehemata damiran v'alma v'maru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'maru amen. Osei shalom b'mramav hu yaseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yishrei Tevel, ve'maru. Amen.
Peter's contribution, which she's about to set up, is in pictures. He's gone through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs. And the result is the story of Judy's life.
And I want to thank everyone who sent me photos, family and friends. It was really wonderful just to see Mom's life over and over and over again.
Yeah.